Say you've successfully ingratiated yourself with your audience, introduced yourself, or even gone as far as framing context for your subject matter. Question is, what then will your next logical step be? Now, if the introduction and the statement of fact are regarded as the preliminaries, then the confirmatio or confirmation, argument, or proof of the case would be the core, the central part, or the main body of a discourse where you get down to business. This is the part where you then proceed to argue out your case. And we argue by providing relevant, cogent, and valid points in support or in order to persuade, dissuade, teach, or to inform an audience, whatever your objective may be. But here are some guidelines to consider when arguing. The first thing is you must have evidence to back your claims. Why? Because mere assertion of facts does not constitute proof. You see, even legal proofs are weighed beyond reasonable doubt or sometimes on a balance of probabilities. But even in judicial and ceremonial discourses where the standard is much relaxed, it is still important to have evidence for whatever you say. Now, I cannot overemphasize the fact that the world is always at stake and that as leaders we possess and wield so much power which we can do in constructive or destructive ways. It's always important for us to have incontrovertible evidence before we proceed to make allegations, because then such allegations might be used to make conclusions that sometimes might be catastrophic and dangerous for human welfare and global security. Now, we can point out the 2003 weapons of mass destruction fiasco in Iraq. We can point out instances in the world wars where the flashpoints were nothing but a total lack of evidence. Now, not all statements require evidence. For example, statements that are considered as self-evident. When I say that the whole is the sum of its constituent parts, that statement does not require any evidence. The second category of statements are those considered to be true by definition. For example, 1 + 1 = 2. No need for evidence. The third and last category are those statements about matters where even the minimally or least informed members of that society are considered to be aware of. These are basically common sense issues. For instance, it's common knowledge that Uganda is a landlocked country. When we turn to Dr. King's speech, we see that he also makes some claims, right? The first is that the forefathers made a promise of freedom, equality, and justice unto all men, right out of the Declaration of Independence. Another claim he makes is that the leaders of America at that time had defaulted on such promise. America then needs to act immediately or quickly to make good of those promises, right? These claims fall under one of three categories of the statements I already mentioned that do not require further evidence. Now, the second guideline is it is important to make our points in a coherent manner. And how do we make our points coherent? By this I mean that the former point must be connected to the following point so that the whole thing is glued together. We can do this by employing the use of coherence devices like demonstrative pronouns, demonstrative adjectives. We could use conjunctions or even use repeated words and phrases. And Dr. King uses so much of repetitions of words and dominant phrases in his speech. We can also use typographical devices to help maintain the unity, flow of ideas, concepts, and logic in our speech. The third guideline is we have to order and dispose our points in an effective and powerful manner. How do we do this? In argumentative discourses, for example, the general rule is that we should not start with strong points and end with weaker points. Weak points tend to reverse the impact of our stronger points. They dull the strong ones. They create this thought that we were not well prepared or we are not so confident in the value of our first points, so we need external props to kind of show up its cogency. And then sometimes we may appear before our audience to have shot our balls, right? And this only leads to a loss of credibility. So it's not wise to start with strong points and end on a weak note. Now, if we have a number of relatively weak and strong points in argumentative discourse, how then may we proceed to dispose them? It is best to start with the strong points, follow them up with weaker points, and come back with our strongest points. Our strongest points must stand in the final emphatic position, because it is usually the final thing we say that our audiences go away with, and the element of surprise that attends such a trend, a climactic trend, is also impressive and useful. Now, what happens when we have points of coordinate value and importance? Now, here we may not follow any particular order, but it is still important to start with familiar points. Why? Familiar points, or the familiar, always win ready consent for the unfamiliar. So if we start with points that our audience already know all too well about, it builds that confidence in what we are saying to the point that they trust everything else that we say afterwards, right? Where then do these points or arguments come from? The first thing is you invent them, right? You invent, create, or generate them. Under invention, invention is a rhetorical process that belongs to what we call the artistic or technical form of persuasion, and this involves ethos, logos, and pathos. Now, ethos is the ethical appeal, pathos is the emotional appeal, and logos is the rational appeal. We can also cater to the system of topics that the early rhetoricians devised to help an orator or a speaker find words, find material, find substance or matter, or what to say on any given topic or subject matter. Now, the second option is you turn to external sources like oaths, witnesses, contracts, tortures, or law, right? And simply find the information there, simply find the content, the matter, the data there, organize it, and just promulgate it. Now, this constitutes what the rhetoricians called the non-artistic or non-technical forms of persuasion, right?